We have these very ambitious goals, and we've spoken about a few, but there are many others. In Europe, in particular, and the EU and countries like the UK have very ambitious climate goals. For Google, we want to be part of the solution. So good for me is we make progress on our goals on our own operations, but we really want to help others. And we actually have, this is a global goal rather than a regional goal, but we have an ambition to help others save a gigaton worth of emissions every year from 2030 onwards. A gigaton is the emissions of Japan, just to put that in perspective.
Wow.
And so I want a big slug of that to come from the work we are doing in helping companies and other organizations and individuals within my region to really help them make more sustainable choices.
Welcome to Analyse Asia, the premier podcast dedicated to dissecting the pulse of business, technology, and media in Asia. I'm Bernard Leong, and sustainability is at the heart of every major enterprise. How do enterprises think about bringing technology to sustainability? Recently, while speaking on the subject of AI for good, I found the perfect person for this conversation. With me today is Adam Elman, Head of Sustainability, EMEA in Google. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bernard. Great to be here.
And Adam happens to be on my panel, and I also want to give a word of thanks to Nico Roosberg, Dale Rickert, and his team at the Green Tech Festival in Berlin for giving me the opportunity to speak and also their hospitality. I will encourage everyone, investors or entrepreneurs, to take part in the Green Tech Festival in Singapore on the 21st and 22nd of October this year. Now, coming back, Adam, after the entire Green Tech Festival in Berlin, you probably will have some reflection. But before we get into that topic, I want to first start off by asking you your origin story. How did you start your career?
No, fantastic. Well, my career didn't really start in sustainability. I guess the sort of first half of my career, I was really involved in sort of program management, change management, leading big transitions for companies. And I was very lucky to be working at the British retailer Marks and Spencer in the early 2000s at a point where the company decided to get really serious on sustainability. And it became really clear to me that sustainability was just a big change program, a big transformation program. And that's really where I had my experience and my skill set. And so I was asked to be involved in help develop their sustainability plan, which was launched in 2007, something called Plan A because there is no Plan B for our planet. One of the very big first corporate sustainability programs. And some 20 years later, that's what I do now.
Ah, and then after that, you joined a couple of tech companies before landing at Google. How did you eventually do that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as I say, I spent quite some time at Marks and Spencer. I was then approached to do a similar role to what I do at Google for Amazon, leading sustainability for Europe. And what I realized during, that sort of 16, 17 years working in sustainability is that whilst it's not the answer to everything, technology is such an important part to make the big shifts we need. The sort of incremental changes of making things 1 or 2% better are just not good enough. So I really recognized the opportunity for technology, was obviously sort of looking around at who's really doing amazing work in this space. And that led me to Google, and they were kind enough to let me join and really, as I say, try and leverage technology to drive the sustainability agenda.
I also remember that during our conversation, we know each other as ex-Amazonians as well. But one important question for you, what are the lessons that you can share about your career journey with my audience out there who's thinking about moving on with their different parts of their careers?
No, absolutely. And as I say, I really worked in the sustainability space for the last 20 years. And so for me, it's been a case of looking at who's doing the most interesting work, where can I have the biggest impact, where's my skill set going to add value. So I've really chased the work rather than the money or prestige or anything else. It's really been for me about chasing the work and trying to find amazing people to work with. I think when I look back over my, the last 20 years, there's a lot of things I'm proud about, a lot of things that I've achieved. But when I say I've achieved, it's never about me. It's about the people I've worked with. It's about a collective team. So I would say chase the interesting work, find the people who are doing, who are really good people. And, I think that sets you up for success.
And that comes to the main subject of the day. I want to talk about sustainability from the point of view from Google, and also what is also for the broader trends as well. Maybe to start off is, we all know Google. It is renowned for its technological innovations, of course, with the recent generative AI as well. Can you start by telling us more about, say, your role as head of sustainability at Google and what's your day-to-day like?
Absolutely. Well, trying to highlight a day to day is always a challenge because every day is very different. But I'm part of our global sustainability team, but I'm regionally focused. So yes, I focus on Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I always sort of think my role breaks into two parts. The first part of my role is more internally focused. So I work with teams right across the business to partner with them to help accelerate our efforts. And our efforts really fall into two categories. First of all, our own business. How do we make sure Google is sustainable as possible? We have big, ambitious goals, aiming to be net zero by 2030 and many other goals. But then the really interesting thing about Google is we also build technology to enable others, whether that's individuals, billions of people that use tools like search, Google Maps, YouTube every day, but also partners. So companies, governments, cities, many others. So I work internally to advance our efforts there. But then the second part of my role is working externally. So working with policy makers, working with partners, talking to other organizations to really accelerate our work. Sustainability is one of those spaces where you only really win and you can only really move fast if you work collectively with others. So that's a big part of our time, figuring out who we can work with, what are the levers that we need to get changed so we can all accelerate faster.
Mm. And also that Google, because it's also at the forefront of sustainability efforts, I've seen some of your blogs talk about like things like data centers, energy, sustainability. Can you talk about some of the key initiatives that your teams are currently spearheading to address specifically to climate change or sustainability in your region?
Absolutely. So let's take those two aspects of the work we do. So firstly, thinking about our own operations. So we are aiming to be net zero by 2030, but within that, we have a goal to be what we call 24/7 CFE, carbon-free energy.
Oh.
So for the last 7 years or so, Google's been matching its electricity use with renewable energy, something we've done every single year. But what that means is we get to the end of the year and we make sure we've bought enough renewable energy to match our energy usage. That still means there are parts of the world and times of the day where we were actually reliant on the fossil fuel in the grid, and we don't think that's good enough. So carbon-free energy for us means sourcing locally carbon-free energy matched to every hour of every single day. So it's really a much higher standard, but something we feel is really important to decarbonize the grid properly. And we've been investing heavily within the region to get to carbon-free energy. And some of our regions and data centers within Europe, for example, are operating at or over 90% carbon-free energy. So that's just sort of one example of work we're doing in our operations. On the sort of solution side, sort of many examples in this space, but one of the really exciting areas we've been working on is using AI to do flood forecasting. So floods are a major issue around the world, affecting 250 million people or so every single year, obviously, often with devastating financial and consequences to life. And our technology around flood forecasting for riverine flooding is so good now. We've launched it in 80 plus countries around the world, most of Europe, Middle East and Africa. And we're able to predict floods up to 7 days in advance. And we make that available through alerts, but also on a platform called Flood Hub. So if any of your listeners want to Google it, you can find Flood Hub and see what's happening in your area.
Can I just also double click? And when you say got carbon-free energy, what type of energy sources? Is it something like wind energy, nuclear energy as such?
Yeah, so it's a mix. And if any of your listeners are interested in more detail, we have papers out there that really detail the methodology and the standards behind it. But yeah, you've got the obvious technologies like wind and solar, but there's obviously opportunities around things like hydro, new always-on technologies like geothermal. We obviously make use of things like battery storage. We're interested in sort of new nuclear technologies. So there's a real mix within that. But I think what I also like to flag is, whilst we're also looking at new technologies, and I should flag, we're interested in bringing new to the grid clean energy. So we don't just sort of say, what's out there, how can we suck it up? We're one of the biggest investors in new clean energy. But we also need to make use of the clean energy that's already on the grid. And again, we do that using artificial intelligence. So we have a platform called Carbon Intelligent Load Shifting that effectively uses AI to say what clean energy is available on the grid around the world at hours of the day, and what are the jobs we need to run, and the technology automatically shifts jobs so we can make best use of the clean energy that's already out there.
And of course, Google's data centers are most reputed for their energy efficiency. Can I talk about some of the specific measures and maybe the technologies that actually make this possible? I know AI is one of them, but I'm sure there are a lot of other things at work as well in order to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you flagged, we work really hard to make our data centers as efficient as possible. Our data centers are about 1.5 times more efficient than a typical enterprise data center. And I think to put that in perspective, compared to 5 years ago, we have 3 times as much compute power for the same amount of energy. So we're really good at driving efficiency alongside the work I mentioned on clean energy. And that's really looking at every aspect of our data centers and every aspect of what we do. So from the hardware that we put in, and we develop, our own tensor processing units and other technologies, and they're already always improving. So we recently announced our TPU6, our Trillium processor, 67% more energy efficient than TPU5 equivalents. So the chipset, the silicon, is getting really efficient. The models we use, we're always constantly evolving the models to make sure they're efficient as possible. And as I say, it's really looking at the energy and how the technology we use to automate jobs and run our jobs.
So given that AI is playing such a crucial role in modern technology, how is Google leveraging AI to enhance sustainability beyond the data center use, but also use case? And also, can you share some real examples on its impact? Maybe things like reducing carbon emissions. I think you talked about productivity software just now, and also the Flood Hub example as well.
Yeah, so we actually worked with Boston Consulting Group last year, and we published a report specifically on this. And the TLDR, the top message is the opportunity for AI when it comes to climate action is to reduce emissions by 10%, up to 10% by 2030. And that's based on existing technology. So not the breakthroughs that are going to come next week, next month, next year, but existing technology and existing use cases. And we really see that around 3 areas, around information, optimization, and prediction, both in terms of climate mitigation, but also climate adaptation. So how do we deal with the changing climate? And the example I gave on Flood Hub is a good example there. But maybe to give another example, one of the areas we've been using AI is to help with the aviation sector. So flying may not be the most sustainable form of transport, but sometimes it is the only way to get to a location. And what's really interesting is after fuel, the next biggest impact from the aviation sector in terms of global warming is contrails. So these are the small white clouds you often see behind the flight. They actually account for around 35% of the emissions from flying. They don't always occur though. And so we've been working with Breakthrough Energy and American Airlines to use AI and our geospatial capabilities to try and predict when contrails will occur, what are the conditions. And we actually tested this with American Airlines on 70 flights, and we were able to reduce contrails by 54%. It was the first time that we've been able to prove that in the real world that contrails can be avoided. And we're now piloting this in European airspace with Eurocontrols, who control much of the airspace in Europe. So just one example of many, but having a real impact in terms of how AI can have a significant reduction in emissions.
You have done this for many, many years, from Marks and Spencer all the way to Google. So what is the one thing that very few people do about making sustainability initiatives work?
The one thing. I'm not sure if there's one golden answer to this. I think for me, look, I started my career from a sort of more commercial business perspective. I've transitioned into sort of sustainability role. I very much come from the perspective that sustainability done right can be good for business. It can make you more efficient. It can open up new markets. It can help you retain, help you attract new talent. And so I think what I always say is sustainability shouldn't be an afterthought. Sustainability should be embedded within your business strategy. It shouldn't be a team on the side of the business. So how do you embed it to everything you do? How do you align sustainability with your company goals? So it becomes embedded within your business. You find ways to use sustainability to enhance the business and drive your business, but you still remain highly ambitious. Sustainability requires huge ambition. We've got, a huge challenge in trying to keep warming to 1.5%. And actually, many scientists will tell you we've already sort of breached that. But I would say embed it within your business, be ambitious, and really look to see how you can drive your sustainability, your business goals with your sustainability efforts.
Interesting. I actually agree with you that actually sustainability should be a business function and not be on some kind of support function as well. Otherwise, nothing will actually happen on that. I guess
I can say at Google, the people working on sustainability embedded without the business. So we have a sustainability team, but there are thousands of people, within engineering, within product development, within our buildings teams, our data centers teams, all focused on sustainability.
So achieving 100% renewable energy matching is definitely no small feat. I guess what would be the major challenges and successes in maintaining this commitment over the years?
The challenge for us certainly is we're going for 24/7 carbon-free energy now, this sort of higher standard. And we operate around the world, which means we need to have clean energy around the world, not only in the right locations, but producing every hour of every single day. So that requires investment in new forms of technology. We've already covered that. But it obviously also requires the right policy framework, the right commercial framework within different parts of the world. And we're not there yet. And so we spend quite a lot of our time speaking with policymakers, putting out recommendations and our learnings on this topic. We published a white paper a couple of years ago on policy recommendations just for 24/7 carbon-free energy. So it's really about making sure that the right framework exists, the right environment to be able to invest in and bring clean energy onto the grid. That involves, as I say, us talking with policymakers. It involves us working with other partners to make sure we've got the right investment there. And then, as I say, making sure there are the right technologies from the new clean energy, but also things like battery storage and the example I gave earlier into carbon load shifting. So it's never one thing, it's a multitude of things, and we need to make sure we're pushing forward on all of those aspects.
You mentioned also the Environmental Insights Explorer during the Green Tech Festival on the panel that we were both on. Can you explain how does it help cities, say, manage and mitigate their environmental impact? Because I thought that was a very interesting example you brought out, and I definitely want you to dive deeper into this because we only have that few minutes to talk about it during the panel.
Yeah, so cities are really important, actually. So cities account for around 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So that's why we've chosen to focus a lot of our effort in helping cities. Cities often have high ambition on their climate agenda, but often lack the data and the insights that they need to help drive their efforts. And ultimately, Google is an information company. We're an innovation company. And so this is an area we believe we can help. So a number of years ago, in partnership with expert organizations who work on cities like ICLEI, the Global Covenant of Mayors, we developed a solution called the Environmental Insights Explorer, or EIE for short. It's free to cities. It has information covering around 42,000 cities globally, around 7,000 here in Europe. And it provides them a range of different information. So, for example, it provides them the data around building emissions, the information around their transport emissions, information about their opportunity to deploy additional solar, or equally increase their tree coverage, tree canopies to help with the issue of urban heat islands. So it really provides them the data that they really need to help inform both their policies and their investments. So one example is the city of Dublin, who have been using our transport data. So we get anonymized and aggregated data from people using Google Maps. We're able to use that data to an AI and inference models to work out what's traveling into a city, what's traveling around a city, what's traveling outside of a city, what modality, and we're able to update that on an annual basis. So, for example, the city of Dublin are using this data to help with their goal to increase cycling by 20%. And they're using the data to, as I say, inform their policies and their investments decisions. And then they're able to check on an annual basis, actually, are the impacts happening? Are these the effects actually what they were hoping to see? Is it actually happening? So cities really like this because it gives them access to information and data that they didn't have. And then they're able to see, are the policies and investments they're making successfully working?
So with the rise of AI now, energy consumption is also a growing concern. I think it used to be Bitcoin for proof of work. How does Google now manage the energy demands of AI technologies, and what would be the steps to maybe there are already steps being taken to actually minimize the carbon footprint?
Well, this is something we've been working on for many years, and whilst AI has certainly been in the news a lot over the last couple of years, Google's been an AI first company since 2016. So if you were using Google Maps 5-6 years ago or search, you've been using AI. Now, there have been obviously huge breakthroughs and significant opportunity, particularly in the climate space. But you're absolutely right. We need to be mindful about the energy use. And when we think about AI more broadly as for Google, we think about approaching this both boldly and responsibly and doing it together. And that very much is the case when it comes to the sort of energy side and water consumption. And so, as I mentioned, we've focused for many years on the efficiency of our data centers, on the models we use, on the chips that are going into this. And we've been very good at driving efficiency. We are at an inflection point, though, and actually really predicting what the increase in energy use might be from AI is very difficult, and no one really knows. So we're just focused on making sure we've got the most efficient infrastructure. We're really focused on the models that we're developing, and we have models that we've been using for many years that have been proven to reduce, energy use by 100 times and emissions by 1,000 times. So it's a real focus on all the different aspects of clean energy sourcing, most efficient models, most efficient hardware and chipsets that are driving that. And we and the rest of the hyperscalers, as I say, have been very good at driving efficiency over many years.
And this comes to the other point, right? Like, for example, one of your other roles is actually to also engage the sort of the stakeholders, as for example, public policy and public engagement with governments. And I guess given the crucial that public and corporate engagement is really crucial for sustainability to work, how does Google work to promote sustainability practices and raise awareness among public and other organizations? I noted that you also talk about the white papers you publish and the reports to try to educate organizations on the sustainability front as well.
It's a mix of all the above. Firstly, as you've mentioned, it's about sharing our knowledge and our learnings, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what we think needs to happen to have a successful environment to drive forward sustainability. So yes, we spend a lot of time sharing our knowledge. We're very transparent. We spend a lot of time, as I say, out talking, whether it's on panels, in bilateral meetings, again, to share our knowledge and experience. But we also work, as I say, collaboratively with many others. So we're part of very many working groups, industry groups, cross-sectoral groups, public-private partnership groups. We really want to work in any way we can to accelerate our work here. And that will often mean working with competitors. So, for example, we're working with Microsoft on developing net zero data centers. So we'll really work with anyone because we think that it's only working together that will drive the progress we need at the speed we'll need.
Given that transparency and also accountability are key, what metrics does Google use to measure its sustainability efforts, and how do you ensure that it's being communicated effectively?
So there's no easy answer to that because we have a whole range of goals that cover our work on clean energy, our work on data centers, our emissions, our work on water and circularity, biodiversity, nature. There's lots of different aspects to this. We publish an annual sustainability report, which outlines all of our goals, that has all of our data associated with it. Much of that data is audited and verified by a third party. So we're very transparent in terms of our goals, the progress we're making, and whether we're making good progress. Some of those goals are obviously very challenging. So that's one aspect of it. And I would say there is a lot of regulation coming, particularly out of Europe, something called the CS, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is really driving the whole industry, company and not just companies in Europe, but companies outside of Europe who operate within Europe, to make sure that they are being very transparent. We've been doing that for many years, but I think this raises the bar for everyone, which is fantastic. But alongside our sort of annual report, we are regularly putting out blogs, white papers, news articles and stories about the progress we're making, the alliances that we're driving. So we're very, we speak about this all the time. And so if any of your listeners are interested, just go to sustainability.google.com. You'll find all of our communications, all of our information, our sustainability reports, our environment reports. It's all out there, and please do to take a look.
So For the companies that are now beginning their sustainability journey, what advice would you offer to them to help them to say enhance their practice or even make a significant impact?
So the great news is that for companies that are just starting their journey, and I sort of question why they're only now starting their journey, but for companies that are starting their journey, I think there's a lot of good practice out there. There's a lot of companies and organizations have been working for a long time. So there's a lot to borrow from and to learn from already. As with any business, it starts with figuring out where your most material impact areas are. So where should you focus your work? There's lots of things companies can do, but where are the things that are going to have the biggest impact? And then, I'm from Google. We're the technology and information company. I would say have a look at where technology can be an enabler. It's not always going to be the solution, but it can be a big part of the solution. And whether or not it's coming to talk to Google, and we've got teams that will happily work with you or others, have a real think about where technology can help with the data and really, as I say, drive significant leaps in progress. We need to move away from companies making incremental progress to really driving forward. And then finally, as I say, work with others. Don't think about doing this alone. Figure out who are the organizations you can partner with, who are your competitors you can partner with, who else in, cross-sectorally should you be partnering with. There's lots of great associations out there, working groups. Join up, learn from them, partner with others, move quickly.
I understand you also cover Middle East and Africa, and I will tell you that, like, for example, in Asia Pacific, I think Scope 3 emissions has been a big talking point. And I think organizations are actually beginning to get like the CSRD type of reporting happening in specific Asian countries, say Singapore, or even in some of like Australia, New Zealand area as well. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And as you've said, a lot of manufacturing happens in the region. So that's why a lot of companies' Scope 3 emissions come from the region. So there are a lot of initiatives where companies are coming together to say, hey, we all have the same challenge here. There isn't really it's not about competitive advantage. It's about driving emissions reduction. How can we partner? How can we reduce cost? How can we go quicker?
So my traditional closing question then, what does great look like for you with Google focusing on sustainability goals, specifically in your region?
What does good look like?
Great look like.
What does great look like? Well, we have these very ambitious goals, and we've spoken about a few, but there are many others. In Europe, in particular, and the EU and countries like the UK have very ambitious climate goals. For Google, we want to be part of the solution. So good for me is we make progress on our goals on our own operations, but we really want to help others. And we actually have, this is a global goal rather than a regional goal, but we have an ambition to help others save a gigaton worth of emissions every year from 2030 onwards. A gigaton is the emissions of Japan, just to put that in perspective.
Wow.
And so I want a big slug of that to come from the work we are doing in helping companies and other organizations and individuals within my region to really help them make more sustainable choices.
Adam, many thanks for coming on the show and really sharing about what sustainability means for a company like Google, and also an inspiration for the rest of the world to move forward, because I think EU so far has been leading in the global sustainability front, and also in terms of even AI regulation as well. So in closing, I have two quick questions. First of all, any recommendations that have inspired you recently?
Any recommendations? Well, I'm an avid reader, and as you can see behind me, I've many sustainability books out there. I'm always hesitant to name one, of fear of upsetting anyone. But I would say there are some fantastic books out there. Go out and read some of the books. There's also lots of great stuff on YouTube. We have fantastic creators on YouTube talking about sustainability. Again, I'm not going to sort of pull out one, but if there's a topic you're interested in, whether it's the transport sector or whether it is more sustainable vacations, whether it is more technical around energy and what have you, I'd say go and have a look on YouTube. There's fantastic content out there at every level, from highly technical to just more general informative. It's one of the best sources I go to for both learning and for inspiration.
I will add one book called Sustainability Without the Hot Air, written by the late David Mackay, who happens I know in Dublin College in Cambridge, and he actually even worked for the Department of Energy in the UK. He didn't just talk about it, but he actually went and worked as a policy advisor. So that would be my recommendation. How do my audience find you?
How do you find me? LinkedIn is my main channel. If you look for me on LinkedIn, and I'm regularly posting and try and put out what I think is content which I think is interesting, inspirational, and educational.
Adam, keep up the great work. And for all the audience out there, you can find us on YouTube and across all podcast channels. Subscribe to our newsletter. And once again, Adam, thank you for coming on the show, and let's continue to talk.